Hello everyone, welcome back to just another F1 podcast here on Apex Motorsport. My name is Richard Smith and this is Season 2, Episode 3. And joining me for this one is Ryan Caldwell. Ryan, thank you for joining me, and how good is it to see Formula 1 cars back out on track?
Good to be back on again. And in terms of Formula One, I am so glad. After the hype of Drive to Survive over the last week, I've just been prepared and ready for this race to finally go underway. And little to say, it was quite an interesting race. So I'm glad to see cars back on the track, and I'm ready to indulge into this podcast today.
Yes, it definitely was a fantastic race. But before we get into talking about the Bahrain Grand Prix, we're going to chat about our F1 fantasy teams. You may have seen right on social media earlier in the week, we put them out for you to see who we've chosen for the first race. And, well, let's say I didn't do as well as Ryan. Ryan, we have a league between us, and you've got positions 1, 2, and 3. So, well done for this week. It is very close, though. Um, there's actually 4 points separating your three teams, and then I have a team that's 7 points behind, and I have a team that's only on 71 points. But I think we'll ignore that one. Ryan, just for the listeners, your leading team, who have you got in that, and why do you think you've done so well this week?
Well, the funny thing about this is that the team that I had, thought about and created through my most interests and stuff is actually the team that's in third. My best team is one of my joke teams, which was called Jap Scrap Engine, which was basically a highlight on Honda Power. So it has Verstappen, Perez, it has Gasly and Sonoda, and then it has Red Bull as its constructor, with Ocon being the only exception. Couldn't stick a Mercedes driver in there, and I couldn't stick a Ferrari powered guy in there, so I was like, right, I'll just stick Ocon in with the Renault. But that, funny enough, has 163 points. I did lose out badly on Perez and Ocon, it seems. But apart from that, I think the team did quite well with 163 points.
Yeah, you definitely did do well there. My strongest team was actually my sort of second team. It was made up of drivers who have recently transferred teams. It was Sergio Perez, Daniel Ricciardo, Mick Schumacher, Yuki Tsunoda, Lance Stroll with Red Bull as a constructor. It's on 152 points, which I'll take that this week. Given the struggles of Perez and Schumacher is probably the weakest link in that team, given he will be down the back of the grid. Because Yuki Tsunoda, Daniel Ricciardo, Lance Stroll all really helped the points there. But that's my teams in fourth. My strongest team. I always like to have a team that's a bit of a joke name. It's based on the Racing Point teams, and this year's called BWT Racing Aston Force at India Martin Point. They keep coming up with new names, so I think every year this team's going to get longer and longer. But it is Hamilton, Vettel, Norris, Gasly, Russell, and McLaren as my constructor. I thought it would be a safe bet, but it's not done too bad. It's in fifth place and 149 points, only a couple of points behind my main team. But Ryan, what's your second team? Was this your main team, or was that your sort of joke team?
Well, my good team is actually the team I created last. The team I created first, which automatically gets entered into like most of the things, which I didn't realize, but it was another joke team. It was the Merc Engine Boys. So it had Bottas, Vettel, Stroll, Norris, and Russell, with McLaren being the constructor. So this time I managed to fit all Mercedes powered cars with their drivers in the team. Still on budget, so quite happy with that. And it is 1 point behind my other joke team, which is on 163 points. So this one's on 162. So I didn't do too bad either with that either.
So that means your team that you would consider to be your first team is the one in third place.
Yeah,
And who have you got
pretty
in that
much.
one?
Now this one is Mered Ast Lau Ari or Uri. So it's basically Mercedes, Red Bull, Aston, you know, so and so you can figure it out. But this has Bottas as the big paid driver. Woohoo! Big disappointment this weekend. And then once again, following that, Perez, another disappointment this weekend. Then we move on to Stroll, another disappointment this weekend. But then we have Norris and Gasly, who saved a few points. I don't know how Gasly actually got on green on my screen when he finished considerably lower than what he should have been. And then McLaren as my constructor, and it has 159 points. So realistically, we're only 4 points away from my top team. So it's all quite close contention.
Yeah, I didn't really make any sort of joke teams. I had a theme for each one, and my third team is where I have the world champions. So you have Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, Kimi Räikkönen, Sebastian Vettel, and of course Pierre Gasly to make up the numbers, with Williams as the constructor. Hits only has 71 points, which I think is very low. It's less than half away from my next best team, so quite disappointed with that. In terms of what we can change for next week, the transfer crew and the world champions team will be staying the same throughout the season. We'll see how they get on. And I think I'm going to stick with my main team, potentially see it maybe replacing Gasly with Sonoda because of how impressive he was. But I think for next week I'll stick with the team. Ryan, are you going to make any changes for next week?
Well, if
For the next
I
race, sorry, not
had
next
the
week.
chance, well, yeah, I suppose the next race is like 3 weeks ago
Yeah,
away. Sadly, we're going to the Emilia Romagna. I'm pretty sure.
yeah, you're the only person who can pronounce
Um,
that.
Emilia Romagna, 2021. Well, I definitely would consider changing my top three in my supposed best team, which would be Bottas, Perez, and Stroll. I would like to manage to maybe swap in a Danny Rick in there and possibly a Verstappen instead of Bottas, but then I'd be stuck on my budget, and I don't know if I would have to drop down my constructor to Ferrari, which would defeat the whole point of the name. So I don't know. It's quite a tricky one, but I'm sure I think I could work my way around it. I definitely need a stronger team than what I thought I was gonna be getting.
Yeah, at least we've got 3 weeks now to really focus on our teams, and we'll see what things are like. And obviously, I think you have to qualify and starts to begin, so we'll be able to see practice and see who's looking strong. But speaking of practice, we're going to jump straight in now to the Bahrain Grand Prix. We'll start with Friday stuff, the practice, and the sessions were dropped from 90 minutes to just 1 hour. I thought it was very good. There was cars on track a lot more often. Ren, did you miss the extra half an hour? The teams usually just sit in the garage when they're changing the tyres. Do you think this is a good move for Formula One, dropping it down to 1 hour?
Yeah, I actually agreed with this proposed idea really early on. Because we see it all the time. You get three practice sessions, and yes, some teams really use that to their advantage. The lower down teams, but the likes of the bigger teams that you want to see on the timing screen a lot earlier on in practice to see sort of where the benchmarks are. They don't really come out until like the last 45 minutes anyway. So dropping it down to the hour means you've still got a better viewing experience, that you can see more action in that smaller space of time. And I think it also helps too for people who don't maybe have the chance to sit and watch the full hour and a half, that may only get a certain amount of time to watch it. So I think it helps even that as well. So I was quite happy that we see a wee bit more action, a wee bit more get go with the it dropped down, losing that hour, half an hour.
Obviously, the big talking point going into this race was whether or not Mercedes are actually going to struggle. They finished practice one, second, and fourth. Max Verstappen led the way, but Lando Norris is in P3. He was half a second off Verstappen. He done 8 more laps than him. But Ryan, did you think at that stage that McLaren have actually really caught up and can actually be a challenger this season?
I think definitely with the introduction of that Mercedes power unit, I think it helped that team along. Yes, they had to push things to one side that they might have thought of focusing on with their token system that they have in Formula One, so that kind of put them at a disadvantage. But I think what they've managed to do in within the regulations, that they can get the most out of that new Mercedes engine, it's helped push them up. And I don't we haven't done a predictions video, but I'm just putting this out there. I think McLaren has a really good chance this year at repeating what they've done last year, at sitting in third position in the constructors championship by the end of the year, because they've put quite a solid performance out so far, even at this first stage.
And how good is it to see McLaren Mercedes, just the name of the car back? Because we've had McLaren Honda in the past that didn't go well. We had McLaren Renault that slowly improved over time, but now this is their chance. McLaren Mercedes, big name, big engine, big performance from so far, and one team that really sort of struggled last season big time. There was concerns about going into the season is Ferrari. They look like they've been able to sort out a few problems. They're not quite up there challenging Mercedes and Red Bull just yet, but it looks like they might be able to take a fight to McLaren for third, maybe fourth. Charles Leclerc was fifth in FP1. Carlos Sainz eighth. Ryan, did you think from the Friday practice alone that Ferrari looked a lot better going into the season?
Yeah, as we know, from the season that was last year and the clown that ran it, things weren't going well for the team. But I think we could see that this year, the Italians finally got their their stuff together and finally started working on a car that is going to be slightly a bit more competitive than it was last year. I think they did announce at some point during the off season that they were heavily focused on next year's car, so that this year's wouldn't be much of an improvement. But surprisingly, the improvement has been more than what many were expecting. We've seen a couple of really strong fast times from both Leclerc and Sainz, so it'll be exciting to see how the season pans out with Ferrari this year.
And not only has the new Ferrari engine helping Ferrari themselves, but also Alfa Romeo, they've been very impressive this weekend for a team that last year was struggling to get into the points. Look that they've got a solid race car this year. They finished 10th and 11th in FP1, and then 13th and 16th FP2. They've put in some decent times, and they definitely will be able to be there at the end of the points if there's collisions ahead and there are a few breakdowns to scrape a couple of points in the race. Ryan, do you think that, well, given that Alfa Romeo have looked improved and Haas are just going to be down the bottom of the grid by themselves because they're putting no effort into this year's car, do you think this Ferrari engine is going to be the key to Alfa Romeo's success this season?
Yeah, as we've seen, Ferrari did say that they were going to fix the engine problems, not just for themselves, but for the other teams around them. Obviously, it's a slightly different scenario for Haas because Haas didn't put the development into the car to take the best out of that slightly upgraded Ferrari engine. Whereas we've seen Alfa Romeo, you know, they're almost, catching the necks of the Ferrari team. We've seen Kimi and even Antonio Giovinazzi really getting close up that timing sheet, closer and closer to the Ferraris. So this season's going to be quite interesting to see, especially with Kimi. Kimi's been in the sport for 20 years, and, does that experience help that car as well to push him up behind the Ferrari guys? I think it does. So I think it's one of those things we just need to keep a close eye on.
And obviously, this race marked 20 years since Kimi Räikkönen and Fernando Alonso made their debuts in Formula One. They raced alongside Michael Schumacher, whose son Mick is now racing for Haas. But I think that might not be the scary part for them. I think the fact that Yuki Tsunoda, who was born the year after that, or the year before that, sorry, made his debut and was very impressive. Ross Brawn's come out today and said that he's the best rookie the sport has ever seen. Do you reckon Yuki Tsunoda can develop and potentially down the line become a Red Bull driver and lead the team back to success?
Let's just hope that the train of thought that's been going at Red Bull for the last 3 years finally sorts itself out and they keep Perez on, because if they take Yuki Tsunoda after this season, maybe if Perez hasn't been as what they expected, and they're like, well, let's give another young gun the chance because he's shown that he's really good and competitive with a new car, and we'll just end up seeing the exact same situation again, and Red Bull will have once again destroyed a really good young driver. So hopefully not. If that doesn't happen, then there's a really good chance that if Sonoda maybe gets 2-3 years at AlphaTauri, or maybe sooner, maybe 2 years, and then move up, depending on how contracts go next year. Hopefully they don't move him up next year, but I think that Yuki Tsunoda has a really good chance at maybe one day challenging for a world championship with some of the best drivers in Formula One for the time. It'll be quite exciting to see how his career develops over the next coming years. So yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely a very exciting driver, and I think we've now found Martin Brundle's new favourite driver in the grid because during the race weekend, I think he mentioned him about at least 10, 15 times. Every time he come on screen, he got very excited. We'll move into qualifying now, and Q1 was a rather disappointing session for Sebastian Vettel, who was making his move to Aston Martin, a team that were further up the grid than Ferrari. But of course, Haas's new driver, Nikita Mazepin, or to give his new nickname, Nikita Mazepin, decided that he no longer wanted to drive a Formula One car, and he caused the yellow flag, put Vettel out Q1. Right, how disappointed were you to see Vettel not make it into Q2 on his debut for Aston Martin?
It was a disappointment, and I don't think that that's on Vettel's accord. Yes, of course, there was the also the thing that came afterwards, the penalty for Vettel for not slowing down yellows, but excuses. Yes, I understand. He's a world champion. He should have seen it, but at the same time, I don't think any more man should be more annoyed about this Nikita Mazepin, who actually, when we found out, overtook most of the grid before they went out for their last final flying laps, and then he spun in front of everyone, basically bringing out yellow flags and denying everyone pretty much a good chance at improving their lap times. So at the same time, I think Vettel could have gotten out of Q1 very easily had that not happened. But Vettel doesn't seem to be on the biggest form just yet. I think he's still uncomfortable with that car. Obviously, he's used to a high rake setup and he's moved to a low rake setup. So there's a lot to get used to. But I think Vettel will improve over the season, and I hope we don't see this repeating over and over like we did see him at Ferrari.
Obviously, because Vettel was knocked out, it meant that George Russell got into Q2. Brilliant to see Williams into Q2 again, but a driver who missed out in getting into Q3 was Sergio Perez, who just narrowly missed out in his Red Bull. Rangers and both of these drivers, Russell, were you impressed with him getting to Q2, and how disappointed were you to see Perez be knocked out?
Well, with Russell, I think it's one of those things, it's either he gets into Q2 or he narrowly misses it. And he was almost on the edge of narrowly missing it, apart from when Vettel went out. So, fair play to the lad, he's really shown that he has talent. He has the ability to push that Williams car and get the most out of it. The same way Lewis Hamilton gets the most out of that Mercedes, the same way Max gets the most out of his Red Bull. He's one of the drivers who can optimize his skill and really get the most out of his car, so there's no surprise how he got into Q2. With the likes of Perez, it was quite disappointing. I was expecting just a wee bit more, but as we know, Perez has never been about qualifying. He shows most of his strength in the race, and we did see how well he was able to, perform in that sense, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a wee bit. But I was quite disappointed to see him out in Q2 so early.
And obviously, we've seen Charles Leclerc take his Ferrari to fifth. Do you think, I know we've already touched on Ferrari a little bit, but do you think this is a real statement that Ferrari are back in business? They're going to perform okay this season, and they're really going to have a go at it next season?
See, that's where I'm sort of on the borderline here, because as we know, next year is going to be a big sort of technical change. And yes, the main constructors will have probably the biggest advantage because they are the ones developing, the stuff first. So I can see Ferrari maybe in the new technical regulations change next year when the new cars come out, I can see them having a chance. For this year, though, I think it's just gonna be how it is. If they perform well, it'll probably be due to a lucky turn, or a couple of drivers making mistakes that they can just take advantage of. But I do think Ferrari is on the upwards, and it would be nice to see them back and reclaiming their spot as one of the best Formula One teams in history.
And obviously, at the end of qualifying, we started to see a battle that all F1 fans have been waiting for some time. Lewis Hamilton versus Max Verstappen. Verstappen had led every session so far up to this point. They said the fastest times in all the practice sessions. Ren, what did you make of seeing Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton battling for pole position?
Yeah, it was really, really good entertainment, I must say. With purple's going one direction, and next thing the purple was being stolen by Lewis, and then the next lap Lewis Hamilton would be on having another purple sector, and then it would get stolen by Max, and it was just this really competitive battle that it was really like, okay, it's starting to really get real. Maybe Mercedes don't have the pace we thought they had, and Verstappen just went up there and he was like, I'm taking that today. You can go sit in P2, and it was good to watch.
Obviously, I would go into the race now. It was Verstappen on pole, but on the formation lap, we had to have an extra formation lap because Sergio Perez stopped on track. He made his way back around to the pit lane. Um, Rangers, were you disappointed to see Perez stop on track on his debut for Red Bull?
Yeah, of course it was, but as we know, it's Red Bull reliability. We've seen it happen in the past. We've seen it happen at the start of a race, and well, likewise, it started before it even started the race. I think it was an anti-stall fault, which then it just cut the car's power, and he then had to roll up onto the side. Where if he had have got the marshals to push his car within that time he was still in the car, they would have classed that as like being a push start, which you can't push start a Formula One car. But in that sense, it would have ruled him out of the race. So that's why whenever you see him sitting trying to figure buttons out on his steering wheel, he was basically telling the marshals, no, 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 don't come here, I'm fine. And he managed to get the car going. And he straggled that car into the pit lane. And I thought he might have stopped, to maybe put a set of hards on at his box. But no, he lined up and he went ready for the race to start.
And obviously, the first few corners, we remember back to the last time we raced in Bahrain for the Bahrain Grand Prix. There's a Haas car crashed out, Roman Grosjean, very scary moment. And again, it's great to see him back racing now over in America. But one of the drivers who replaced him, Nikita Mazepin, decided he just wasn't going to even attempt to drive the car. He lost the back of the car, tried to correct it, and then as soon as he put his foot in the throttle, the car spun into the wall and out of the race. It sets a new record, I believe, for the fastest DNF on debut, and um, I've heard a couple of people say that it actually Valtteri Bottas' pit stop later in the race was actually longer than Mazepin's debut race. So Ryan, just very quickly, Nikita Mazepin, just do you think he's an embarrassment to the sport based on the driver we know as past? But he said to judge him on his racing, and to be honest, I don't think too many people have been impressed by him so far.
Well, I suppose we've just got to take his history as his word. He has proved that he can race fast. It does take him a while. This year, I don't think will be his year in terms shortest, because he's not used to having so much power under his right foot, and I think he just gets a wee bit too heavy-footed and thinks he can go out of a corner quicker than he can, and in reality, it's just going to kick the back end out and into the wall. And that's just because that's probably what we're going to see a lot of this season.
We did see his teammate Mick Schumacher spin as well in lap 4, so there could be a bit of a problem with that car in terms of the steering. We don't really know, but obviously then that brought out a safety car, the Mazepin spin, and then Pierre Gasly lost his front line, brought out a virtual safety car, so it was quite a hectic start to the race. Then we started to see a couple of battles between Bottas and Leclerc, and then Leclerc and Norris. Ryan, just quickly in this one, do you think that these battles could be quite interesting if Ferrari up there, potentially for maybe third, fourth place in the championship?
Yeah, no, I think it's really important for the sport too. If there's no competition, as they were saying, they want to close the grid up as much as possible. And I think this is going to be the year where we've had the closest midfield battle we've seen in quite some time. So it'll be quite exciting and it's quite healthy for the sport. I think, even for the drivers, because there's no point you sitting driving around a track for 50 odd laps and you maybe 10 seconds behind somebody and you can't catch them. You're just sitting there by yourself the whole time. Where if you've got something to push for, to challenge against, then it becomes more interesting for the drivers and for us. So that's the way I see it.
And then the battle between Verstappen and Hamilton was looking quite lively, but it was always going to be a question of which team would blink first and bring the driver in for an early pit stop. And it was Mercedes who done that, and Red Bull decided to leave Max Verstappen out, which I think ultimately cost him, as Hamilton come back round, about 7 seconds. It's something that we see Mercedes do a few times. They make a mistake with Hamilton, but Hamilton's always seeming to claw back the time, and we've seen that from Verstappen. Ryan, do you think it was a good call for Mercedes to bring bring Lewis into the pits, to make that early stop and force Red Bull's hand that maybe not going the way they would have liked in terms of race strategy?
It wasn't even the fact that they managed to do it once. They did it twice in that race. They managed to pick the perfect points in that race where they were like, right, if we pit here and we pit there might be a chance where we'll actually end up undercutting them twice. We've seen it with the first one. Max got ahead, and we were like, oh well, that's that. So, well, sorry, they swapped around rules because Max was ahead to start with. But then obviously Lewis gained enough time that when Max eventually needed to come in, they were able to go past. And likewise, Verstappen did start to catch up on the back of those Mercs, and they once again realised that he's not going to be able to keep that pace up forever. And they swapped Hamilton onto another set of hards. And in the time that Verstappen stayed out and stayed out and stayed out, Lewis was slowly but surely creeping up behind him, enough to close the gap on Verstappen's next pit stop. And which I think ultimately cost him the race was the fact that Mercedes was able to get inside Red Bull's head and toy with them. So it was good to watch.
And probably the next moment, I think it was maybe foreshadowed by the movie Cars. It's seen Carlos Sainz doing a double overtake on Fernando Alonso and Sebastian Vettel, passing the equivalent of 6 world championships. It created a brilliant picture, and it just looked amazing, and it was a fantastic overtake. Ryan, what did you make of that?
It wasn't even the fact that he passed two world championships with two world champions with six championships between them. It was the fact that Sainz looks up to Alonso as his star, his celebrity that he has favoured the most in the world, and he went and just passed him with no struggles, just slipped right through. I suppose he would have had like almost a double slipstream, should I say, or that might be not the case, but we definitely seen that the Ferrari had a wee bit more power than the Renault and the Aston that day.
And obviously, Lewis Hamilton, when he was in the lead, he did 12 laps to break Michael Schumacher's record of 5,111 laps in the lead. He broke that, he's now in 5,112. But it was right at the end when things started to calm down a little bit. It was the battle between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen that I think had everyone at the edge of their seat. Verstappen went for an overtake at turn 4, went 4 wheels off the track, overtook Hamilton, then slowed down to let Hamilton go back through. There was a lot of complaining because track 4 limits, they were in discussion throughout the weekend. I think the official line, and I think Sam Collins, the F1 technical expert, he said that in the rules it was based on gaining an advantage, and that it would only apply for when drivers are defending or going for an overtake. We've seen Lewis Hamilton use a very wide line throughout the race, and once Red Bull caught onto that, they reported to the stewards and allowed Verstappen to go out that far. Hamilton was then told to not go out as far, or it would get a time penalty, the black and white flag. Ryan, track limits is open discussion, but this battle, it went right to the wire. But do you think if there's any way that if Verstappen carried on, he would have got a 5 second penalty probably for making getting an advantage? Do you not think he might have been able to get 5 seconds ahead in the road, or do you think Hamilton had enough pace to keep the gap within 5 seconds?
No, I definitely think that Verstappen probably at that point might have been able to pull 5 seconds because as we've seen, he was still chasing then for another 2 laps. And 2 laps, a lot can happen. We've seen Lando Norris manage to make up, what was it, nearly 2 seconds or 1.5 seconds at the start of last year in Austria, to take Lewis Hamilton's third place podium. So I think there would have been a good chance that Verstappen had at that time, if he had a went on and it was under investigation, he probably would have won the race based on the fact that he probably would have only got a 5 second and definitely not a 10 second because that's for more serious breaches of the rules. But as it was said by Christian Horner after the race, I think it was, he he had to give that position back immediately. There was no, other way, two ways about it. If he had a carried on and ignored team radio, there would have been quite the handling after the race, least to say. But it's one of those situations where the track limits weren't made clear to everyone. There's one set of rules for qualifying and then a different set of rules for the race, and the set for the race weren't exactly clear. So I think, Michael Massey, as they kept talking about him the whole time, they need to, him and the rest of his little goons or his squad need to maybe pay a bit more attention to what's going on and sort that stuff out for the next race.
I think it was great to see a different side to Max Verstappen, because the old Max Verstappen, the young Max Verstappen, he's still young, but the driver coming to Formula One, he wouldn't have done that back then. Over the last season, the last year, we've seen him really grow as a driver and become a lot more mature in his racing, and it's great to see. But that's the Bahrain Grand Prix. It's 3 weeks until the next race and 3 weeks to the next podcast. I'll just do some predictions now before we go. Ryan, who do you think will be the fastest qualifier and take that pole position?
I'm gonna stick it out there and say I think Max might take it. I really do.
Well, you said Max Verstappen. I'll go for something a little bit different. I'm going to stick with Valtteri Bottas. I think he's got something to prove. Sergio Perez could be up there, but I don't think. I think Hamilton Verstappen might go into this race a bit too confident with the cars, and I think Bottas might just have a little something to prove. Race winner, I'm going to go Sergio Perez. Why not? I think, given how well, we didn't really discuss him too much, but it was a fantastic drive from him. From sort of replicating what he did as Akira, had to go to the back of the field and work his way through, and something that we've seen Red Bull drivers do quite often. But Perez, he done it that well that it wasn't really shown too much because it was so easy. And I know we didn't discuss him, but Ryan, very quickly on Perez, what did you make of his performance during the race?
I think he really showed that he can take that Red Bull and prove a point. He went from basically last in the grid at one point and he started clawing his way up straight away. At one point I think we seen him up in fourth, but he did have to pit still, so he did obviously lose his places then. But the fact that he was still able to get his way up to the grid to sit in behind Bottas, it's still an achievement for the Red Bull driver. So it'll be one of those things, after having so many funny seasons with Perez, I think this year he's really going to shine and get a few more podiums and possibly a few race wins.
I'll complete the podium now by saying, obviously, at Perez to win. I'm going to say Verstappen second, Bottas third. Ryan, who's your top three for the race?
Well, I'm definitely thinking that there is a great chance that Lewis might actually win this race. just on merit. I don't think, you know, maybe Max might not have the best chance at it. It's as we seen last year. He failed to actually finish the race. He DNF'd before it even started. Well, he DNF'd on lap 50, I think it was, later on in the race. But I think I'm going to stick. So Lewis is going to win. If things go right, I think Max is going to be right up there, right on his tail. And I'm going to throw in a wild card. I'm going to go with last year's third place, and I'm going to say Daniel Ricciardo again.
That's definitely an interesting lineup. The reason I haven't put Hamilton on the podium is I think there's going to be a bit of a collision between him and Verstappen, and Hamilton will get a puncture and he'll drop down a little bit. Hopefully not, because I would love to see Verstappen and Hamilton again, because we got a little taste for it and now we want even more. Ryan, wild card for the race, it could be anything. It could be who you think will impress in practice, qualifying, or the race, or just a crazy moment. I think it will be Yuki Tsunoda he will have a battle with Fernando Alonso and come out on top. What's your wild card prediction?
My wild card is going to be someone who may have won an Italian race last year. Ooh. The other AlphaTauri, Pierre Gasly. I think AlphaTauri has a great chance this year, and I think they might be able to do something special, but I think Pierre might just be able to get the most out of that car compared to Yuki Tsunoda. So we're at opposites here, but I think we know who's got the right one here.
Yeah, I'm going to put Gasly P5. Why not? Where would you think Gasly will finish?
I think he's definitely top 10 material for this next race. Well, actually, he didn't actually do too well last year. I think he had to retire early, really, really, really early. I can't remember exactly, but no, I think he has a good chance this year. He's in the right mindset. He's focused. He's prepared. He's ready to be a leader. I think it's the top 5 definitely.
Yeah,
that's bold.
Yeah, it should be an exciting race. Gasly went out last year, lap 8, by the way. So yeah, that is going to bring to the end episode 3 of Just Another F1 podcast for season 2. First race of the season. It was a fantastic start. Hopefully we get a little bit more of this going forward, and if we can have Hamilton versus Verstappen throughout the season, it would just be spectacular. Ryan, any final thoughts from you going ahead to the Imola Grand Prix, or the Emilia something? You can say it, I can't hardly pronounce it. The Emilia Romagna.
The Emilia Romagna.
Yeah, I think I think we'll just be calling it the Imola Grand Prix, or the Grand Prix Imola. Used to be the San Marino Grand Prix as well. It's got so many different names. Ryan, yeah, any final thoughts from you?
Final thoughts. Keep an eye out for them Alfa Romeo's next race. Something special could happen.
That's a decent shout there. So yeah, as I said, that is going to bring to the end today's podcast. We've relaunched the website. We recently hit 1 year on our YouTube channel, on our website. Basically 1 year since we started. It was actually one day before the UK went into lockdown, so it didn't take long for us to get bored and to find something to do to pass the time. But yeah, just on behalf of both of us, for everyone the past year, just a big thank you for your support. It's been incredible. We've had a couple of months where we had some really great growth, some months that we haven't had so much, but either way, the last 12 months has been really enjoyable, and hopefully as time goes on we can continue to grow and get more opportunities and make the channel even better, and maybe start a couple more podcasts down the line. We never know. We really do enjoy them. So yeah, thank you all so much for listening, and we hope to see you all next time. Goodbye.